Welcome to the Surgibots Podcast, powered by Cruxx.
There are multiple verticals when you look at a robotic company that you have to master. AI, data science, everyone's talking about that, and the integration of those tools and telepresence. So right there you have multiple vectors. We want to be a global player in the soft tissue multi-port robotic landscape. And I think we have a unique product that will allow us to do that. You have to find the right people. People for me is everything in a strategy. And when you're doing this as rapidly as we are, you have to balance speed and quality. The new generation of surgeons, and I'm going to say for the most part or predominantly, will be trying to implement robotics into their practice. We can really provide a difference and allow people to pick and choose what they think is best for the patient.
Before we deep dive into this episode, I wanted to take 30 seconds to introduce you to the sponsors of this season of the podcast, TTP. TTP is a technical consultancy that has a 35-year track record helping companies transform innovative ideas into market-ready products. Their 300-strong team of scientists, engineers, and designers all under one move can take care of your surgical robotics or imaging technology from a napkin sketch all the way through to early stage commercialization. I was lucky enough to get the invite out to their Cambridge facility. They gave me eyes on a number of the projects they're working on, and not only is the facility state of the art, but the main competitive advantage I see with these guys is their people. A group of incredibly smart, focused and friendly guys who do not shy away from a lofty engineering challenge. If you want to learn more about some of the work they've done or to talk more about a project you have in mind, shoot me a message on LinkedIn or visit their website, ttp.com, to get in touch with one of the team. Hello, Greg, and welcome to the Surgibots Podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here with you again, Henry. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on here, and I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about the story with Dexter. And before we get into that, just give me a breakdown of your background. So talk me through your career up to this point.
Yeah, so maybe a little unique on the educational side. I went to university at Miami of Ohio, and then followed that up by going to law school. So I do have a JD, which is maybe a little unique. Had my first 5 years were outside of medtech and technical sales around back when the exchange of data wasn't based on the internet, believe it or not. So I might be dating myself a little bit, but did large data networking for Fortune 500 companies as I was starting my career. And then I found Stryker in 2005. So I spent from 2005 to 2012 with Stryker in various roles. I started in their endoscopy business. So I always say soft tissue robotics is a bit of a coming home for me. I started my career in laparoscopic surgery. We're now really accommodating the same surgeries where I started. And then I spent 2 years in their captive finance business. So running the commercial components of their captive finance or leasing business, and also their large account strategy in the US I led from 2010 to 2012. I got in 2012 got pulled over to work for Zimmer Biomet. So I ran the commercial expansion of their surgical business. Did that for 5 years and took that business from 90 million to about 220 million, and then picked up general manager responsibilities for that business and a few other businesses. And then the most applicable experiences, I led the launch of the ROSA knee towards the back half of my career at Zimmer, which was from 2012 to 2021, so 9 years, and launched that product globally, and then had a 2-year stint at what I'd say as a light company in Avitera, which is a German-based soft tissue robotics startup, and then was lucky enough to connect with a couple board members from Distalmotion over the last summer, and really found this to be a great and unique fit, and started there November 20th of 2023.
Awesome. Appreciate you getting into that detail. So I want to push. So where was the first time you came across surgical robotics? What space was it in, and where was the first time?
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely was at Zimmer, and I had sat in a lot of strategic meetings talking about when surgical robotics was going to be relevant in the orthopedic space. So that, I mean, those discussions were going on, in the early 2010s timeframe. And obviously, Stryker made an acquisition of Mako, and therefore, the discussions, I would say, heated up, and Zimmer ended up acquiring a company called MedTech out of Montpellier, France, which had a neuro robot, which was converted to orthopedics. So it was kind of in that, 14, 15 timeframe. But obviously from a commercialization perspective, or when we actually launched a product, it was a few years after that.
Okay. So was that acquisition, was that a trigger because Stryker got into the game and it was kind of a reactive piece of M&A, or was this something that was in the works for longer?
Yeah, I think maybe both. Look, I think really the hard part with orthopedics was understanding what value, and I think you and I have talked about this before. The value around a product, typically has to solve a problem. And I think really what people were struggling with in orthopedics was, what problem does the robot solve, right? There's very, very skilled surgeons, as there are, from a laparoscopic perspective. So is the robot truly bringing value? And I think Mako, that acquisition of Mako for Stryker, it started to show not only that there was high market interest in that, but it actually did bring value. And so that's when I think the exploratory discussions became more strategic on how, number one, of course, you got to defend your business. And if you don't have something in your portfolio, there's that big of a gap, it could create pressure in the marketplace. But I think more importantly for Zimmer at that time, they wanted to find a product that really added value to the surgeon. And what we saw was it did. I mean, people really changed the way that they perceive how to do a total knee. They're making more patient-centric cuts, moves. Soft tissue balancing and soft tissue preservation became over-indexed, which I think is really, really good for the recovery of the patient. So it was kind of two vectors. Obviously, again, you got to be attentive if someone has something that's differentiated and is proving out to be something that's strategic and smart to do. That's one thing, but also you always have to solve the problem and really drive a positive outcome, which I think Roche has solved.
Sure. And I think it's going to be useful to go into this because I find it fascinating, the early stage surgical robotics commercialization. So Rose's very early stage commercialization was a big success and actually exceeded some of the targets. So talk to me. So when you're looking at commercialization in a brand new field where you've never commercialized a robot, how do you make it successful? And I guess how do you build that commercial structure to take it to market?
Well, I think, a couple things. So I'll talk maybe first organizationally. There's a difference between being a large strategic and, maybe a company that's in its earlier component or, so I don't want to say startup because Distalmotion isn't a startup. It's now 12 years in the making, but we don't have the means that a large strategic has relative to commercial expansion. So with Zimmer, we had a different philosophy. I mean, we could lean on a large sales organization, an orthopedic sales organization, implement specialization, and really ignite a launch in a different way. I think, when you're looking at maybe some of the other companies around the peripheral now in robotics, you have to be deliberate and measured. So you have to know where, you have to apply segmentation strategies. You have to know exactly where you can win. You have to over-index in places that you have a right to win. And you have to be, because I think we've seen a couple lessons learned where people have over-indexed on commercial or let's say sales and marketing, and they've had to retract. You have to continually provide value for the company. So you have to do it in a measured way. And I think incremental, sustainable, repeatable growth is, kind of what companies like Distalmotion should be focused on in the early stages.
Okay, understood. But going back to kind of the Zimmer side of the equation, so early stage companies is one thing, but how did you create even in a big strategic, because there's other strategics that are struggling mentioning no names, that are struggling to commercialize surgical robots. So how was it that you got that early stage like hype and growth and I guess, revenue? How did you get it so quick?
Yeah, so number one, I mean, incredible development team, right? So I guess I casually mentioned they took a neuro robotic, converted it to total knee. That's not easy to do. I just made it sound very easy, but incredible software team in Montreal that they had acquired through another acquisition. Just super talented. And again, that goes to ultra important to have, very skilled experienced development teams behind you, regardless of the size of the company. And then the other piece is, in that particular scenario, Zimmer has an incredible global brand, great implants, which is obviously the adjacent sale to a robot, large market share. So they had all of these kind of tailwinds, and you had high growth in robotics. One of the things that I learned there was this site of care component, right? How important enabling new sites of care. So in this particular example, outpatient surgical hospitals and ASCs, where the patient and the physician have just a much better experience when they go to get a surgery. So, that was one of the areas we focused on. We're doing the same thing here at Distalmotion. As we prep for U.S. launch, that is a huge focal area for us because there are so many intrinsic benefits. So again, sometimes you can ride, and I think in our market or in orthopedics, there's a wave of growth that is going to happen, right? That is going to happen, but also you can empower or enable surgery in places that benefit either the patient or the physician. And that, that's another key part to that strategy we had and the strategy we have at Distalmotion.
Awesome. So moving through, finished the role at Zimmer Biomet and you came to the German company Avatar Medical. So talk to me a little bit about the journey and some of the lessons learned from that experience.
Yeah, so, I always say my 2 years there prepped me perfectly for this role. And what I would say is incredible team. There, I was really blessed to work with that team for the time that I had. They had made incredible progress on a product, but this goes to show you, Henry, that robotics is difficult. It is not easy to do, and for various factors. I would say one of my key learnings from that 2 years, which is one of the reasons I ran towards this Distalmotion opportunity, is being the master of everything is almost impossible. And what do I mean by that? There are multiple verticals when you look at a robotic company that you have to master. So the robot, of course, is one. Instrumentation is another. If you have a closed system, you have visualization, advanced visualization, so meaning ICG or potentially multispectral imaging, other types of advanced imaging that allow the human eye to see more than it can naturally, or it would see more than it naturally would. And then AI data science, everyone's talking about that in the integration of those tools and telepresence. So right there you have multiple vectors. And I always give the example, even the best companies in the world can't master all of those things. So it's truly very, very difficult. And again, that's why I loved Distalmotion. We've chosen to allow the customer to be the master of those vectors by choosing Distalmotion for the robot and instrumentation, but you can choose your advanced energy or stapling partner. You can choose what you prefer in visualization or ICG or advanced imaging. You can choose your telepresence partner. We've happened to partner and align with Cruxx because we think that's going to be great for our infrastructure. But the customer also has a choice. And then, we'll continue to focus on data and analytics, number one, internally to empower the robot, to be more efficient, to, allow us to service the customers in the best way possible. But also, if we can get to it, to allow us to provide different points of information at site of care, so surgeons can make the best decisions possible for the outcomes of those patients. I don't think anyone's totally there yet, but I know that that's where everyone's going. So lot of work streams, but, I would say to the team at Avaterra, love my time there, love the team, and really, wish all but the best for them as they go forward in their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So we start at Distalmotion then. So what was the reason behind, I guess, the why for joining Distalmotion? What was it that was attracting you, and what was the pull towards Distalmotion?
Yeah, so it's multifactorial. I'll start with the basics, which is the team. Michael Frederick, who's now our COO and was one of the founders of the company, he did an awesome job in saying no to a lot of things, which is, why I think we have the only small form factor open platform in soft tissue multi-port robotics on the planet. But that took a lot of strength. It's very easy to try and get in and do multiple things. So you're trying to serve kind of all constituents. And I think he and Distalmotion made the right choices early on in the development of this product, to put it where we are today. Also, from a board and investor perspective, we have the right people around the business. We've got, great private equity firm. We've got a strategic on the cap tables, a lot of blue chip investors around us, which was fantastic. And then finally, the product. One of the things that I learned at Zimmer, and, we focus on simplicity, accessibility, and excellence. And when I say excellence, again, I mentioned that we want to build a world-class robot that can accommodate all surgeries within gynecology, urology, and general surgery. We want to make up, best-in-class instruments, but obviously we also have, the understanding that we have to make it accessible. And so we have to do it for markets and sites of care where, both logistically, financially, and clinically, they can implement these things, right? And then simplicity, and this is a big one, and again, a learning from my time at Zimmer, Distalmotion's product is based around the workflow of the surgeon. So you implement the technology into the surgeon's workflow, whereas some of the other, closed-ended systems, I'd say the surgeon has to work around the workflow of the robot. And that's very, very different. And again, when you talk about implementing tech into a workflow, it needs to be simple. It doesn't mean the device isn't complicated. I think I've said that publicly a bunch. It just means that it has to integrate simply both for the surgeon and the team supporting the surgeon in that operating environment.
Okay. So I guess I'd love to find out, why would a surgeon choose to use Distalmotion over some of the other providers that are out there?
Yeah. So we probably don't have enough time on the podcast to talk through all the reasons why I think why, but again, I'll just kind of stick to the themes and maybe some of the differences. So we have a very small format robot, right? So when you talk about accessibility, smaller ORs, different sites of care. So in the U.S., in countries like the UK, Switzerland, where they have outpatient surgery centers, we believe we can logistically serve those sites of care based on that form factor. The other component is we have a sterile console, which is very unique to Distalmotion. So when you talk about accessibility, and I'll use inguinal hernia as an example, the surgeon can use all the benefits of robotic technology. So suturing, dissection, working in confined space with wristed instruments, which is what makes laparoscopy very, very difficult. So you can be incredibly efficient. But we have a lot of surgeons that actually will move over and apply the mesh in those particular cases laparoscopically, which is incredibly efficient, right? So they can basically blend the best of both worlds, or what they think is best for that particular surgery, and also what they think is most efficient for that particular surgery. So that's really unique. If you look at any of the other systems and people coming in and out of scrub to do different things, whether it be firing a stapler, if it's not integrated on that device, or an energy device, it's pretty cumbersome. So it's incredibly unique. Logistically, we have a single-use instrument. Speed and efficiency not having to sterilize, or at least having the ability not to sterilize, is incredibly valuable. The other piece, and again, a learning back from my initial launches with Zimmer, there's facilities that just don't have the capacity or the financial capacity to hold the inventory required to do these high volume robotic procedures. So there is basically, what we think we're solving for clinical components, so bringing something in that integrates into the workflow that allows the surgeon still to be connected to the patient, also massive benefits there from a training perspective as well. And then you have this accessibility perspective. So, you can't bring some of these larger form factor robots into an outpatient surgical hospital or ASC, or even some of the smaller ORs in a European setting or a US setting, where you get into regional hospitals. So, we think we make it accessible there, and then financially accessible, right? Trying to drive down that cost per procedure and the total capital outlay or cost for service. We want to try and be disruptive there as well. So a lot of different variables, where we think we can really provide a difference and allow people to pick and choose what they think is best for the patient.
Interesting. And this is a common theme across some of the other podcasts as well, but you've mentioned it a couple of times already. The centers of care are changing within the market, and surgical robots need to fit into these future of the ASC and the future of the outpatient setting. So can you tell me a little bit more about what's driving this transition to the outpatient and to the ASCs, and then how Dexter fits into that?
Yeah. So I think for what we talked about before, if we think about, especially with these higher volume, lower acuity types of procedures, going to a brick and mortar hospital or a large academic can be very cumbersome on a patient. It's not as easy, to maneuver or operate through those facilities. The experience is just a little bit different. And so there's a quick in and out relative to the patient. The experience is much better. It's less invasive. And quite frankly, I think they're probably leaning towards that. The physician, the same thing, right? And again, it doesn't mean that a large hospital isn't an efficient environment, but you can drive greater efficiencies when you're in these different sites of care. So I think patient and physician experience is kind of two of those factors. And I also think just efficiency around costs, right? So you're doing more with less. You're able to serve, maybe a greater population of patients just because of the infrastructure is maybe a little bit more nimble and designed to serve those types of procedures. Why Dexter fits in, again, just all the things that we talked about before. Size, flexibility around instrumentation, the ability for a surgeon to flex in between, the surgical field. So if they need to do something, they can get quickly to the patient. You don't need multiple, surgical techs assisting. You can work with one. You don't need another physician in the sterile field. So again, you can be more nimble with the system. Cost is a factor as well. And again, we hope to be disrupted there. And I shouldn't even say cost, I should say value. But really focused on, allowing them to be, hit those, and then implementation, again, making it easy for them to implement the technology and not disruptive to their workflow as well. But, all three of those things, kind of the clinical, logistical and financial verticals all have to be solved for that to be right. One final comment, the procedures are moving there. The highest growth in the procedures we cover are going into these sites of care. In fact, of our total TAM in the U.S., which is roughly 5 million procedures, and in the verticals we call on, 3 billion of those are in outpatient surgical hospitals today. But the highest growth is in the outpatient surgery center. So, I think there's a balance, but there's surprisingly a lot of volume, a lot of and there's not a lot of penetration in those sites of care for all the reasons I just mentioned.
So can some of these bigger mainframe robotics companies compete in the ASCs and the outpatient setting, or are they going to struggle?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everyone can remove the financial barriers with the right strategies. But I think it's going to be very difficult to solve for just mass, right? Its size and sterilization requirements and instrumentation and all of those things factor in. So, I'm not to say they can't do it, but that's where I believe Distalmotion has a tremendous leg up, at least, initially as we prepare for U.S. launch.
Okay. So what's your vision for this company? Where do you want to take it, and where do you see it in the future?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're obviously getting ready for a huge market launch in the U.S. But I think, to kind of go back to our mission, around accessibility of robotic surgery, we think we have a formula to really drive to the benefit of the patient, really drive robotics into, again, new sites of care and into different procedures. Again, I've commented before that Dexter is really made to serve these high volume, low acuity surgeries. We can always flex up. I use the example, we do tons of prostatectomy and nephrectomy, and we've done colorectal, and we've done Whipples, and we've done all the complex, but it was made to serve this huge volume of surgeries that aren't being done robotically for one reason or another today. And so I actually think we complement a lot of the things that are happening already in the trends in robotics, and will allow that to, allow us to be a market leader in maybe a very unique space of the robotic market. But yeah, I mean, look, we want to be a global player in the soft tissue multi-port robotic landscape. And I think we have a unique product that will allow us to do that.
For sure. I'm interrupting today's episode to bring you a word about one of our sponsors, Fundamental VR. If you go back to season 1, you'll find a great episode with Richard Vincent, the CEO of Fundamental, on all the reasons why training in the virtual world can shorten the learning curve and reduce training burden and costs. Improve competency at scale with interactive digital twins of your surgical robot or medical device in a high-fidelity virtual environment. Drive commercial success with Fundamental VR's virtual reality solutions. So scaling up for a US market launch then, you say it's going to be a big market launch. So what are the kind of activities you're doing, and how are you trying to prepare for going to market in the US?
Yeah, I mean, look, getting ready for any market takes quite a bit of work, but we've started our hiring, and I would say the one thing that we know is we want to make sure we delight every customer. So our priority hires are, clinical hires, their service, logistics. So to make sure that we can get a product to a customer, that we can support them in the right way. And again, like I said, we're going to be very deliberate from a commercial perspective. We want to make sure that we're doing this the right way to build a sustainable, profitable business. So
being really deliberate about that market release, how do you select the initial sites who are going to be, I guess, the first delivery sites for Dexter in the US?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one thing is obvious, which is they have to do hernia, inguinal hernia. So for me, it's a combination. I mean, we want to obviously showcase that we can drive high utilization. We want to make sure that we're aligned with the right academic facilities for training and education. So I think it's a combination of things. And the other thing, which is what we just spent a ton of time on, we want to show we can do it at a new site of care, right? So that is a huge part of our initial launch is partnering and working commercially with, some of the large outpatient and ASC conglomerates or companies to prove with them that this is the right thing to do for all the constituents that we've talked about earlier. So kind of a three-pronged strategy.
Understood. So what are going to be the biggest challenges to this market release? What are some of the big barriers that lay ahead of you, and what have you got to, overcome coming to the US?
Yeah, I mean, look, outside of one company, it hasn't been done in our space. I know there's, in other robotic disciplines, it has been done, but it hasn't been done in our space. So, I think just that inherently in itself presents a challenge. As I said, I think we really complement, the market leader in the U.S. and in what they're trying to accomplish. So I think that is a benefit for us. But just, building anything to scale, and I think this probably would resonate with you deeply. You have to find the right people. People for me is everything in a strategy. And when you're doing this as rapidly as we are, you have to balance speed and quality. And again, that's sometimes really, really difficult. It's very easy to index to just put a body in a seat, and we cannot do that. And then the second step is obviously building a high quality organization that knows how to serve the customers in a highly complex environment. And that goes for everything. It's not just clinically; it's how you deliver the product. It's how you serve the customer. It's how you build an organization for the future.
Sure. And definitely treating the customers is one of the big things. I know when we've worked together previously, it's been very focused on the customer. The customer's the king. The customer is the one who you're preparing for when you go to market. So we've covered so far your market launch into the US, which is upcoming, but Dexter's been in the market now for a little while, and you've just covered 1,000 cases, which for any robotics company is an achievement and a great number to get to. So talk to me about how Europe's gone, and I guess how things have gone so far.
Yeah. So great question. One of the things, and again, you even see it with some of the launches that are coming out from more mature companies. I think there's a period of time where you're really trying to assess. Number one, make sure you have the technical components of the device really, really rock solid. And when I say that, not from a safety perspective, but from a consistency perspective. So hardware and software, everything is harmonious, and we're really at that point where we know we have a great, safe, effective product in every procedure. The other thing is where do we have a right to be great? And so, we've done obviously in those 1,000 procedures, we've done procedures across the spectrum in general surgery, gynecology, and urology. So now we know where we can really delight the customers. So that's one component. So I would say we really started to commercialize, mid last year, and then now we have, well, where are we going? What are we doing? We are using Europe to drive our U.S. indication strategy. So a lot of the accounts that you'll see are involved in the pivotal studies that we'll be presenting to the FDA. And that's, very intentional in the procedures where we think we have the greatest right to satisfy, both the customer and the patient. But also we're really proving and testing out our segmentation. And again, I mentioned the word deliberate. We're also doing this in Europe. We're being very deliberate, and again, we'll likely hit the gas a little bit later, but we're being very deliberate. So we're only commercialized in 3 countries in Europe, which is Switzerland, Germany, and France. And we will, start to expand that over time. But we have proved to ourselves, again, that there is this great need to make robotics accessible, not only from a hospital perspective. We found hospitals, one of our largest customers in France, never had the ability to acquire another robotic technology for all the reasons that we discussed. But we also have several customers that have multiple robots, but can't find ways to make it accessible, in general surgery or gynecology or some of these other disciplines. And we've been able to come in and offer a complementary technology to what they're already doing. And again, for all of the benefits that we discussed, it's been really nice. So we see, really we've proven out what our beliefs were in segmentation by going out and doing it and having our customers tell us, yes, this is absolutely the place to be focused, and this is where we think you fit best. Okay. So it's been a great success so far. And, we really continue to hit all the metrics that we expect to hit with our launch there.
Great. And I would say that do you think that it's more surgeons coming away from laparoscopy and coming towards Dexter who want to try and get into the robotics field but don't necessarily want to have to relearn all their skill sets? Or are there also the interest from the people who are coming off the mainframe robotics who have been out in the market a while and actually being drawn towards Dexter because it's getting back towards them more the core of what they train for? What's driving that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a wave of surgeons coming out of residency fellowship that are trained in robotics, right? So you have this, from the new generation of surgeons, and I'm going to say for the most part or predominantly will be trying to implement robotics into their practice. But, when we talk about the benefits of robotics and the ability to use wristed instruments to raise the bar when it comes to suturing, dissection, and working in confined space, because that's where laparoscopic procedures get very difficult, I think you will see some conversion. And the other thing is, and I mean, again, we learned this with prostatectomy, converting from open to robotics is also a great opportunity as well. So you again, if the system is not overly complicated from an adaptation perspective, you could bring that group along as well. So we actually think we will serve the surgeons that are coming out. And again, there are barriers why people don't have robotics that aren't just clinical. So they, maybe they can't afford or they don't have the ability to, logistically to put in one of the current systems that are out there. But then from a clinical perspective, again, easy uptake. As I mentioned, from a training perspective, the surgeon can be in the sterile field, but also the resident or fellow can be in the sterile field. So you now see just a more genuine exchange in a training environment. So we can get, not only the surgeons that are teaching have a better opportunity to get closer to that resident or fellow, but we actually think the uptick or speed of learning for Dexter may be faster because they're going to have exposure both in the sterile field and on the console, which, isn't as easy when you look at some of the other systems. So a lot there, but we've got a lot of tailwinds that are going to help us. But at the end of the day, Henry, I think everyone would agree, competitor or not, the goal is to raise the level of care and give the surgeons the best tools in surgery, to help that surgeon get the most optimal outcome. And that's what soft tissue robotics does. That wristed instrumentation, 3D vision, all those things allow the surgeon to really have, the best tools for those procedures.
For sure. And it's not as common in soft tissue for everyone to be talking about leveling up the field as a whole. There's a certain sector I look at, vascular surgery, neurovascular surgery, where they're all talking about bringing up the field together, but you don't really hear about it in the soft tissue space quite as much. But this year is going to be very, very interesting in terms of commercialization. Do you think it's going to be a really messy battleground, or do you think it's going to be something where the surgeons are just going to be really happy that they've got options now?
I think optionality is always good. I mean, optionality from a innovation perspective is fantastic because I think it really drives us as companies to continue to iterate and innovate. I think from a financial perspective, it's going to be great for the customer. And I think, again, from this empowerment or enablement perspective, it will be very good, allowing, end customers or hospitals to offer robotics to patients in different places. So, again, I think we all agree that robotics is here to stay. I think you see, huge trends in kind of growth in these spaces, especially the procedures in general surgery and gynecology that we're focused on. So Yeah, I think it's going to be great for the U.S. market. And without, I know you didn't mention any names, and we don't need to. I think different technologies for different, problem statements, right? And some of the technologies that you talked about, you mentioned Moon specifically. I mean, that is a solo assisted surgery. That's not really a robotic surgery, in my opinion, from a wristed instrument perspective by that definition. But there are going to be, people that need that type of technology. And then when you want to get into the intrasurgical types of stuff, needing that wristed instruments, 3D vision components, that's a robotic. There are a couple solutions there, and where are we driving those surgeries? What are we going to do? So, I think optionality and competition is healthy, and I think the market can support several players. So I don't think there's any issues there.
Well, that's good to hear that you think it can support several players after having just one player for such a long time. So it's interesting to hear that. Where do you think this is going from an M&A perspective? So there's a couple of market conversations going on at the minute about some of the big guys acquiring some of the smaller and mid-sized companies in surgical robotics to be able to get in and compete for some of their core businesses, and robotics is the future. So where is M&A going, and where do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it continues to be proven that innovation can, is maybe a bit more rapid outside, of some of the larger companies. And when I say innovation, I'm talking kind of initial innovation. All of those companies are very innovative in their own ways, but there's a lot more bureaucracy. When you get to kind of the innovation that you need around robotic surgery, specifically in our field. I think it will continue. I mean, from a Distalmotion perspective, I would just say we're building, we have our head down, we're building a company to scale. I mean, that is, we're not really thinking about that. We're thinking about how to put a company out there that can make a difference globally. That can be a major competitor in the global markets, and right now for us specifically in the U.S. and Europe. And then again, come late 25, 26, other markets, other growth markets. So I would say I think it's always an opportunity. I think there are definitely, given what's happened in the last 6 months, needs from some of the larger companies to fill holes. But for us, again, we think we fill a market need, and we're very, very focused right now on that.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess being in the position you're in, you'll get a sentiment for kind of the interest levels from these. So have you seen an uptick ever since, I guess, the big market release of that big £800 gorilla?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of interesting things there. I mean, they obviously have an endoscopy or visualization standalone tower, that was mentioned. And, there's other kinds of nuances in technology, but no, I mean, look, I don't think there's been any more uptick. I mean, I think, the launch is what people expected it to be. They got a great product. They continue to do things, that help and bolster their business. But I think everyone really has a good sense of where the market is. So I don't think anything radically changed, at least for me, when that was launched. I mean, I think that's what I expected them to launch. So and I'm my guess is, the companies in and around, or that compete maybe in adjacencies with them, probably felt the same way.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. So final question to round off our conversation today. So let's talk about the future of surgical robotics as a whole. So where do you think it's heading, and where do you think the market is going?
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said, I think there's tremendous tailwind from a lot of different perspectives. So as there are more market entrants, and I do think it's, people always talk about hundreds of players in robotics. When you start to parse out the different specialties, so when you think about multi-port soft tissue, there's really not that many, that have the ability to expand globally. So the market is pretty small, but I see continued expansion geographically. I see continued expansion from a site of care perspective, and I see continued expansion procedurally. So I think there's going to be those three tailwinds, and that from as I mentioned, a teaching and training perspective, at least the research that we've done, everyone's vested. The large academic facilities, medical training, everyone's invested in implementing these types of technology into their educational programs. And I think fellows and residents are actually leaning in on being in those types of programs long term. So, I had someone tell me the other day they have 56 operating rooms. They have nine robots in those. So the way I look at the market is, okay, if there are a lot of ORs that are right now not served by robotics. And I think by 2030, 2032, that's going to be more like half of those 54. So instead of going out, you're really going to see, I think, a large infusion in some of these technologies like Distalmotion are going to enable, hospitals and physicians to, have a greater adoption. So I think the future is very, very bright.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much for being a guest on the Surgibots podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you.